John Bolton, who is the author of Surrender is Not an Option, Defending America at the United Nations, which, of course, is where Mr. Bolton served as ambassador during the Bush administration. So I want to ask you, because clearly diplomacy is not working, there's a very little chance that we're going to see the kinds of sanctions that would actually stop Iran from going nuclear. So what do you think, Ambassador Bolton, it would take to stop Iran?
At this point, there's very little that will stop Iran. The most likely outcome, unfortunately, is that Iran is going to get nuclear weapons, and I think sooner rather than later. The international community has spent close to 10 years trying to negotiate with Iran, and Iran has used that time, as proliferators often do, to overcome the many scientific, technological complexities that stand in the way of a successful nuclear weapons program. So that right now, basically the only scenario that I see other than Iran getting nuclear weapons is military strikes against their nuclear program that result in breaking Iran's control over the nuclear fuel cycle. And since I don't see any possibility that the Obama administration will use military force, I think what that means, to cut to the chase, is that this comes down to a decision by Israel whether or not it will use military force against Iran's program. I don't think Israel has made that decision yet, but I think it has to be very much on the table, because as unattractive as the military option is, the other possibility, Iran with nuclear weapons, is even less attractive.
Is there a military option? Let's get that straight. Do you believe Israel has the military capability to strike Iran in the first place?
Oh, yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think the problem is that the military option is declining day by day. Every day that goes by is another day where the Iranians can build alternative facilities for uranium conversion, uranium enrichment, weaponization, that are in unknown locations, that are deeply buried or hardened, and that Israel's capabilities are just can't reach. Right now, we know about the facilities for uranium conversion at Esfahan, uranium enrichment at Natanz, the heavy water production facility at Iraq in Iran. But we know where they are. We know exactly what their dimensions are, and I think they are susceptible to an Israeli attack. But as we've seen from the discovery of the hidden facility near Qum, the Iranians are constructing alternatives. So as time goes by, the Iranians can create redundant capacities that the Israelis can't reach. So the military option itself isn't there forever. And if Iran, in fact, does turn out to be close to a weaponization capacity, this is a decision that if Israel is going to use military force, it needs to use it sooner rather than later.
We are speaking with John Bolton, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. I want to ask you, Ambassador Bolton, about the opposition in Iran, which is something that the United States, the Obama administration, other than empty words every now and then, we've done very little to support, even though there's this major democratic movement on the streets of Iran. People are literally dying to protest against the regime, which is something we haven't seen in Iran for decades. Do you think at this point supporting the opposition in Iran would make such a difference that they could actually overthrow the regime?
I think that the regime is very unpopular. I wish we had been doing more over the past 10 years, really, to support the opposition, because when we saw that opposition take to the streets after the fraudulent June 12 presidential election last year, I think everybody could see just how widespread the opposition was. But because we had not been prepared, because we had not been supporting the opposition, we really missed a big opportunity. And I'm not sure how soon it will come again. Power in Iran, as even Secretary Clinton acknowledged a couple of weeks ago, power in Iran has flowed from the Ayatollahs toward the Revolutionary Guards, meaning that the people with the guns are the strongest force in Iran today, which makes it obviously very difficult for unarmed civilians to do anything about it. I think our policy should be regime change. I don't think it, at this point, will come soon enough to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, which is why I think that has to be our single most important focus, but I think long-term regime change has to be in U.S. strategic interest.
Now, in your speech to CPAC about a week and a half ago, and of course we're speaking with Ambassador Bolton here on 77 WABC, in your speech you said that President Obama, quote, does not care about foreign policy. What do you mean by that?
I think it's not something that motivates him when he gets up in the morning. He doesn't see the world as very threatening. He'd rather deal with issues of domestic policy. I think you can see that in the record of his first year. I think you can see it in his State of the Union message last month, where foreign policy came in only near the end and only very briefly. And I think that, combined with his assessment that the rest of the world doesn't contain many threats or challenges for the United States, leads him to conclude that he doesn't have to spend much time on it. Now, obviously, he responds to events in the outside world, but he doesn't do it because of the sense that that's one of his highest priorities. He does it because it's unavoidable for a U.S. president. That I think, combines to send a signal of inattention and weakness to the rest of the world that I find very, very troubling.
Okay, how much damage do you think that President Obama can do during the time that he has left in office? And I'm asking this as a serious question. Do you think that by the time President Obama is finished with his 3 years, is finished spurning American allies, is finished building up American enemies around the world, do you think that the United States is still going to be a superpower? Do you think that we're going to have the superpower status when President Obama is finished that we had when he got into the Oval Office?
I think we'll still be a superpower, but I think we're going to be more vulnerable. People have asked after 1 year in office, is America less secure than it was when he took office? And I think the answer to that is certainly yes, but I actually don't think that's the right question. The right question is what will be the effect of 3 more years of these kinds of policies?
Exactly.
So will we be more or less safe at the end of 4 years of his term than we were at the beginning? And that's why I think where I think the vulnerability comes in, because adversaries around the world have watched Obama very carefully in his first year in office. They've listened to what he's said. They've watched how he's reacted to various crises. And, this doesn't happen overnight, but they are making changes in their policies to try and take advantage, in my view, of what they see as the Obama administration.
Is he a 3-year president? Do you think that President Obama is going to be in for 3 years and then that's it?
Yeah, I think because of his failures in domestic policy and his lack of success in foreign policy, he will be very vulnerable. But obviously, you can't beat somebody with nobody, so there's still a lot of decisions that remain. But I think he has every prospect of being another Jimmy Carter.
We're speaking with John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations under the Bush administration. Well, Mr. Ambassador, what about you? I want to nominate you right here, right now on 77 WABC. Why don't you run for President of the United States of America?
Well, thank you. You're very kind to say that.
I would vote for you.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that. It's a very hard road for somebody to run for president. It requires a lot of money and so on. A lot of people ask me about it, but what I intend to do is talk about national security policy for the next 3 years, because, although people and politicians focus on the domestic economic recovery, and we should, the rest of the world isn't waiting for us to get our economic house in order, and our national security is an absolute prerequisite to a strong economy. So I'm going to be making those points, and I hope those who do run pay attention to them.
John Bolton, former ambassador to the United Nations, author of Surrender is Not an Option, Defending America at the UN and Abroad. Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.